Friends, it is a stormy, nasty day, and me and Mags are out here hanging out in the drier barn. A little bit leaky here and there, but we don't mind. Maggie does mind the thunder, however. She's not a fan of the thunder, so she's probably going to be sticking close to me most of this video if I had to guess, and shivering. Poor thing. Terrified of thunder. Wrangel Island is about 100 miles off the coast of Siberia. It's about 100 miles long by 50 miles wide, give or take, about that size, and it is in the Arctic Ocean. It's a pretty rough, inhospitable place to the untrained eye, even to the trained eye. The average temperature there is pretty dang nippy. I looked it up, it's about 5 degrees right now. If you're standing on Wrangel Island right now off the coast of Siberia, it's 5 degrees, a balmy 5 degrees this spring day. The record low is somewhere around minus 70, so negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit, complete darkness in the winter for months on end. The opposite during the summer, the sun's out all day long, 24 hours a day, sunshine there. It's a pretty crazy place up there in the Arctic on Wrangel Island. Ada Blackjack was an Inuit woman, an Eskimo woman as they called her back then, and she was born in Alaska. If it gets too windy, we might need to pause the video. Sorry about the rain noise, but I do love the sound of rain on the tin roof. Like I said, Ada was a pretty tough girl. She grew up in Alaska. Her dad died when she was about 8 years old from food poisoning. She had a pretty poor upbringing and was not super well off, to say the least. But she was highly skilled in a couple of things. She was really an excellent seamstress. She was quite good at crafting Arctic clothing out of materials such as reindeer hides. She could make a pair of boots that was completely waterproof without any extra additives, no oils or anything like that. Her stitches were so good that she could make a pair of boots that you could walk in the water with and they wouldn't leak. So her excellent seamstress abilities is what initially made her eligible, is why she was selected to go on this Arctic expedition. Now, Ada had kind of a rough life. Her dad died when she was 8. She was not well off, was pretty much poor. She lost 2 children. They died at an early age. She had 1 son still living, but he had tuberculosis. She had to place her child, her only surviving son, who was about 5 years old. He had tuberculosis, and she had to put him into a children's home because they could take better care of him. Oh, man. Hopefully the audio doesn't get off too bad, guys. Again, tin roof, what are you gonna do? It's storming. I figured it's a perfect time to tell you a survival story. Oh, and by the way, guys, if you haven't already hit the thumbs up, please do. I'm really grateful for that. All you gotta do is just boop. Ada was hurting for money. She didn't have much money, and she was offered a position on this expedition to go colonize the island of Wrangel. That was kind of the plan. Britain had a plan to colonize and claim this island off the coast of Russia. Their whole goal for this expedition is to send people up there, send families, and send people to populate this area and claim it for Britain. That was the idea. So, a group of 4 men, all Americans except for 1 Canadian. He was 20 years old, and they placed him in the leadership position of this expedition, this colonization expedition, because he was the only Canadian. I think most of the rain is past us now. All right, so where were we before we were rudely interrupted, Mags? Poor girl, shivering. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. All right, so Ada, struggling, tough life. Dad died early, very poor. 2 children died. 1 son had tuberculosis. Her abusive husband that beat her up, the coward, finally ended up leaving them all and set off on his own. Good riddance to him. She was on her own, had to make a living cleaning houses and sewing clothes and things of that nature to be able to provide for herself and her son. Ada was hard pressed for cash, so she chose to go on this expedition because she was promised $50 a month And to her, back then, $50 a month was way more money than she had ever made before. So the temptation was there, the allure of making all this money, so she could bring it back and help support her son, herself and her son. It was a really, really tough decision, but she chose to go anyway. They were going to this place that the Eskimos, the native people of the area, called Polar Bear Island. It was called Polar Bear Island because there was a lot of friggin' polar bears. Now, Ada was terrified of wild beasts. She was really, really scared of polar bears. So that tells you how big of an incentive that $50 a month for her must have been. She was going to be gone for a long time, and at least a year, and she was going to be away from her son for that amount of time. So it had to be pretty alluring. That $50 a month was a big deal to her. There were supposed to be other families, other Eskimo families that were going to join them along on this trip, but they all ended up not showing up. They all ended up backing down and saying that they weren't going to go because of reasons. So it ended up Ada was the only one that showed up to go on this trip. There were no other families. It was 4 men, Ada, and a cat. That's the only people that showed up to go on this ship and to sail to Wrangel Island. So in September 1921, they set off heading towards the island, and they had 6 months supplies. 6 months of food, basically, stored away in this boat. And they were assured that 6 months of, even though they're going to be there for a year, they were assured that 6 months of supplies was going to be plenty to see them through because of the ample game that they were going to encounter. The bountiful wild wilderness of the Arctic was going to supply them with the nourishment that they needed to get through. Despite a few setbacks and shortcomings that the crew may or may not have had, they made it to the island. They made it to the island. And the first year on the island of them settling this place went pretty smooth, went pretty well. I mean, they were hunting successfully. They were trapping seals. They were eating pretty well. But within that first winter that they were there, they went through almost all of their 6-month supply of food. Now, during this time, there are reports in the men's journals that Ada experienced something they called Arctic hysteria. And that was a pretty well-known condition that a lot of women kind of faced during these times, specifically Eskimo women. It was believed by the Eskimo people, the native people of the area, to be caused by evil spirits, like possessing the women, basically. Most people, Americans and British and Canadian people believed that it was caused by a lack of sunshine during the long, cold winters. But anyway, she would have, emotional fits and be upset and refuse to work and all sorts of issues and stuff like that the men reported in their journals. One of the men, after Ada refused to repair some of his clothing or his boots, he tied her to a pole until she would do the work. So she wasn't exactly treated like a princess on this island. Now, like I said, a year went by and they were doing pretty well. And they had gone through just about all of their supplies, but that was okay because they were going to be resupplied by a ship. However, 1922 was an exceptionally icy year, and the resupply vessel was not able to reach the island and was not able to deliver the resupply, the much needed resupply of food and equipment and all the things, specifically food. So, the men on the island and Ada were forced to continue hunting and to deal with the situation in the best ways that they could. And while they were having success with the hunting and the fishing and all the things, they were still heavily reliant upon the supplies that they had brought. And now that those were gone, the men started to suffer. Ada started to suffer. They were starving. They were literally starving to death. They were suffering from scurvy really bad because of a lack of vitamin C. They were in a bad spot. The men were suffering now, Ada was suffering, and they were attempting to go get help and to get resupplied. They attempted to get off the island and cross the frozen sea to get to the mainland a couple times, but it didn't go well. They were suffering from frostbite. They were in a weak condition. It didn't happen. They weren't able to do it. In January of 1923, The 3 men attempted to leave the island because they had to leave one man behind because he was really weak, really sick from scurvy, suffering pretty badly. So they left him and Ada on the island by themselves, and the 3 men attempted to cross the ice pack, to cross the ocean, the frozen ocean, in January. In the middle of the Arctic winter, they attempted to go get help. Those 3 men were never heard from or seen again. They disappeared. No one knows exactly what happened to them. Frozen, eaten by polar bears. Who knows what happened, but no one will ever know because they were just wiped off the face of the earth, never to be seen again. So now Ada is by herself with this really weak, sick man, and she's having to take care of him. They're eating seal blubber, seal fat. She's trapping. She learned how to hunt and to shoot. She was not an experienced hunter. She did not have how to shoot a rifle, even though she grew up in the Arctic. She just was not experienced with these things, so she had to learn and teach herself how to do these things, and she did it quite successfully. She was able to gather food to feed herself and the sick man that she wasn't taking care of. However, it wasn't enough. They were still starving. They were still low on calories, low on vitamins and minerals, and they were suffering. And the man that was suffering from scurvy eventually died. Now, Ada is all alone in the middle of absolute nowhere. She is on a desolate Arctic tundra island in the Arctic Ocean, in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. She's all by herself. There is nobody within hundreds of miles of her. The record low on Wrangel Island is negative 71 degrees Fahrenheit. There's no more than about 20 to 25 days that are frost-free on this island. So 20 to 25 days where the temperature does not get below freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. And there's a whole lot of days throughout the year where the temperature does not even get close to coming above the freezing point. Wrangel Island right now, currently, the temperature in Wrangel Island is a balmy 5 degrees Fahrenheit right now. It has the most polar bear dens of any place on Earth. It has the highest population density of polar bear dens anywhere in the world. And that's where Ada was, all by herself. And this is a rugged place, guys. There's no trees. There's no forests. It is a pretty barren landscape. It's Arctic tundra. I mean, there's plants. You know, during the warmer times of the year, the summer months, there are plants, and there's quite a good variety of them, but they're about this tall. That's about it. It's a pretty barren landscape. It is rough and rocky. There's some big, tall mountains on it, huge, massive cliffs that drop off into the ocean. It's super windy. Gusts of 80, 90 miles per hour happen during these storms. It is a pretty rough place to be. Now that Ada's all by herself, she's trying to make ends meet. She's taking care of herself as best she can. The cat is still alive. The cat is still alive and well on the island with Ada. She's hunting, she's setting the traps, she's mending her clothing, she's staying warm the best that she can. But it's a pretty desperate situation because now she's starving. She is starving and she is suffering the effects of being in this icy cold climate in the middle of the Arctic. So she made it a whole nother year. But eventually, a steamboat came to her rescue. A steamboat came within reach, within eyesight of the shore, and she looked out into the distance and she saw this steamboat coming towards the island, and to her rescue, she ran off and onto the shore and she waved her arms, just ecstatic with just glee, and fell to her knees in gratitude that finally someone was there to take her off of this miserable island, this polar bear infested island. The press went crazy about this story. They started talking about it. They called her the female Robinson Crusoe. There were books and articles written about her survival ordeal and about this woman, Ada, and all the things that she had to endure. So Ada received no royalties for any of the books or publications written about her. They tried to stiff her of her $50 a month that she was owed for going on this expedition in the first place. And then on top of all of that, they attempted to charge her with crimes. They tried to charge her with starving the sick man that was left in her care, not depriving him of food and care, and eventually he died because of her lack of care. And I don't know if any of that's true. I don't know if it's partially true. I don't know. There's stories she wrote about being kind of scared of the man that she was left alone with in the first place and not trusting him. So there's a lot of things that could have happened behind the scenes that we will never know about. But I do know she was probably dealt kind of the short end of the stick. And then eventually at the age of 83, 1985, I believe the year was, in Alaska, Ada died, poor as she ever was. However, she was able to scrounge up enough money to still take care of her son. She was able to get him care, get him down to Seattle, and where he was able to get enough medical care and attention to treat his tuberculosis, which is an amazing victory in and of itself. So Ada was a good mother, and she says that the only thing that kept her alive on this island was thinking about her son. That's the only thing that kept her taking the next step. Just getting up each and every single day and doing the chores, the necessary things that needed to be done. She was inspired, she was motivated to get back to her son because she knew that he needed her. Friends, I'd love to hear what you think about this survival story in the comments section. Let me know what you think about Ada and her will to survive. I'm always motivated and inspired by these types of stories, and you probably are too, otherwise you wouldn't be here. If you haven't already hit the thumbs up, please do. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that because I'm putting out content all the time. And if you're not subscribed, if you don't hit that notifications bell, you're going to miss out on some good stuff. Until next time, friends, what's the worst that could happen? Let's go on 3.